الله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Brothers and sisters, welcome to our first online halqa using Zoom. Jazakallah to those who have assisted to make this possible. Tonight we're discussing the word Sadia. Can you please mute your audio, Jazakallah. So can we just make sure everyone's audios are muted, otherwise the sound coming out of your phones will be heard. Jazakallah. Okay. So tonight we're discussing the word Daraba and the illegal practice of wife beating. This has been a big bone of contention in the Muslim world. And the problem statement is, I'm going to quote out of a few stats that are available online. This is from the book Price of Honor. According to Risha, the marriage was a violent one. If I was slow in obeying, I was beaten black and blue. My nose was broken. When my family saw me, they told me to use the beatings to get a divorce. But I was afraid of divorce. It is shameful for a woman. And that's from the book Price of Honor. What we also are told is that 90% or nearly 90% of Afghan women suffer from domestic abuse, according to the United Nations Development. And in Iran, which is a fairly progressive state that is known as the Islamic Republic of Iran, shows that 66% of women at the beginning of marriage have been at least physically abused once. A reminder to please mute your phones. I'm hearing someone's voice coming through. Okay. In Jordan, 91% of university students polled by the Jordanian Human Rights Center approve of wife beating. And sorry, I'm hearing some drums as well in the background. So can I ask you to please mute your phones? Right. So 91% of university students polled at the Jordanian Human Rights Center approve of wife beating. Just this shows you the level of indoctrination that comes with this. An earlier study by another organization found out that the majority of women also support the right of a husband to beat the wife. Now, I'm sure if you really, have a one-on-one with these women and ask them for a true, reflection or for their true beliefs on this, they'll say it's something that they would never approve of, but because they indoctrinated to believe that it's so, they just accept it as such. But to accept the physical beating, I don't think any woman would really approve of. But anyway, be that as it may, let's look at the verses of the Quran. Now, at the outset, I must say, as believers, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly commands us to do something, then we should have no hesitation in doing it. But if He doesn't command us to do so, and it's people's interpretation, then we certainly have a right to challenge that interpretation. So, Surah 4, verse 34 is the verse that deals with the matter. Al-Rijalu Qawwamun, you can take out your Qurans, hope you've got them all in front of you, and you can look at the verse. Surah 4, verse 34. Al-Rijalu Qawwamuna ala al-Nisa bima faddala Allahu ba'dahum ala ba'd wa bima anfaqu min amwalihim. As you go down, we look at some of the what operative words. The first one is Qawwamun. Al-Rijalu Qawwamun. Qawwam is one who protects or takes care of another, who shoulders a responsibility, etc., and keeps things in order. The other one, important word is Wallati takhafuna, if you fear or have a concern, nushuzahunna, of disloyalty or rebellion. Okay, let's go on. So, how is the verse translated by traditional commentary? I sent out a note as well. I hope you read the note. If you haven't, please read it after this talk as well. I think it's important that I've given some other supporting evidence of other scholars and what they say. Someone's phone is not on mute. Okay. Translated by traditional commentary, men are the protectors and maintainers of women, because Allah has given the one more strength than the other, and because they support them from their means. Therefore, the righteous women are devoutly obedient and guard in their husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. As to those women on whose part you fear disloyalty, that's nushuzahunna, and ill conduct. Now this is important, follow the slide. Admonish them, in brackets first. Sorry, I can hear someone speaking in the background. Shabir. Shabir.
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay, so we're going to mute all participants. No, it's fine.
Okay.
So please make sure your phones are on mute. I see everyone's phones are. Jazakallah. Okay, so the translation continued. وَاللَّاتِ تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ فَعِذُوهُنَّ. Admonish them, in brackets first, next refuse to share their beds, and last beat them lightly. But if they return to obedience, seek not against them means of annoyance, for Allah is most high, great, above you all. Now, look at the words in brackets. Admonish them first. It's almost telling you that's the first step, right? And it's preparing you for higher grades of punishment. Then the next bracket is next. Refuse to share their beds. Then the third one is and last. Beat them lightly. So in the mind of the reader already, it's prepared the reader to accept that there's 3 steps of grades in carrying out the punishment for nushuz, or the right given to the husband to bring the wife into order if there's a fear of disloyalty, right? So the words in brackets, as I said, are used to prepare the mind for a progression in the disciplinary process. In other words, an increased intensity. Now let's look at the verse a little carefully. Okay, what does nushuz in this context mean? The basic meaning of nushuz is disloyalty or to rebel. Whether the husband is present or not, the wife continues her daily duties. If she cooks, she continues to do so, and there is nothing to protect in this regard. When he is absent, she continues these tasks, and hence the only reference to guard or hafadha is to her chastity. Accordingly, the word nushuz here, in my opinion, is in the reference to the fidelity of the wife. Now the word were, right? If you just keep 434 in front of you and keep the Arabic in front of you as well, we're dealing with the word were, which is and the part of the verse which says وَاللَّاتِ تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ فَعِظُوهُنَّ وَاهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ. So the word were is very different from the word thumma or the word fa, right? The former indicates the possible application of joint steps. Now the word were is used in 434, and this I think is important for us to apply our minds to. Not the word thumma and not the word fa. The word thumma and the word fa are clearer indications of separation, whereas the word were and is used more frequently for joining. So the former, the word were, indicates the possible application of joint steps, while the word fa or thumma indicates progressive or separate steps, right? The connective particle fa is usually translated as then. Okay, so there's enough verses in the Quran which show that the word fa is a second or a different step, and is used to indicate a sequence of events. Now the word fa is not used here, the word were is used here. However, were is used here and not thumma or fur. Now I hope I'm not losing everyone, but if I end at question time, please bring it up again. But basically the word fur or thumma is not used in the context of the disciplinary process, but the word were is used, which indicates a joint set of steps rather than a progressive set of steps. So in other words, the one punishment is not carried out after the first one fails, nor is it more intense than the previous one, etc. This is what some scholars have basically inferred and interpreted, which is not to be found in the text. The problem with the wife-beating proponents, and I don't think there's a better word to describe these people other than the wife-beating proponents, is that they see these steps as 3 progressive and more intense steps to bring about compliance on the part of the wife. Naturally, with that in mind, one will expect each step to be more severe or harsh than the previous failed step. Okay, so the first one will be warning them, and then they say that one fails, then the next one is a more harsh step. So in other words, it's preparing you for the ultimate, which is beating. Overall Quranic context, when to beat. Now, if we look at the word Daraba has got many interpretations, many meanings in the Arabic dictionary, and the word Jalada has got a restricted use. And in the Quranic context, when Allah wants to say beat, then He doesn't beat around the bush. He says beat, and He uses a very restrictive word, or a word that's restricted to a lashing on the skin, which is Jalada. Oof. Hello? Sorry, can you mute your phone, please? Okay, Jazakallah. So, if you look at Surah 24, verse 2 and 4, Azaniyatu wa zani fajlidu kulla wahidin minhuma mi'ata jalda. Right? وَلَا تَأْخُذْكُمْ بِهِمَا رَأْفَةٌ. The word jalada, if you look at the presentation, I highlighted it there, the word jalada, to hit or beat or hurt or beat the skin or to strike. It's clearly, and it's in reference to beating and not showing mercy. Now here, what will you find? Allah telling you the intensity. He says, don't be moved by compassion, you must carry it out, or by mercy in this case, it's a serious crime, and you must carry out the beating. And how many times must you do it? You must do it 100 times. So Allah doesn't leave it to our discretion as to what to use to beat and how to beat and whether we should beat. It's all very, very clear, right? So it's used in the Quran exclusively for hitting. So the word jalada, there's no doubt about it, and it's used exclusively for beating. The word daraba is very different. So here in 24:2, when it comes to the word jalada, Allah tells us how to hit and how many times to hit, which is not the case with the word daraba, as used in 4:34. Hitting is therefore reserved for proven cases of adultery and not suspected cases. Now what do we learn out of 24:2 as well? There is no just takhafuna. There is no fear or suspicion or feeling of someone having done something wrong. There's a clear evidence process, and when this evidence process is met, only then is the beating carried out. Whereas in 4:34, if you go back to 4:34, it says, "Wallati takhafuna." If you have a concern that there's infidelity, this is how you deal with it. So only in the act of proven cases of lewdness, and this is carried out to both the male and the female, is there 100 stripes, and that the word jalada is used. Where there is takhafuna, where you have a suspicion or a concern, then you apply 4:34. And what does 4:34 now say to us? So before we go there, what happens when there is no evidence but suspicion of infidelity? So this is another important point as well. 24:6 says, "And for those who launch a charge against their spouses and have in support no evidence but their own, their solitary evidence can be received if they bear witness 4 times. Sorry, can someone, can you mute there please? I can hear someone's background noise. Right. And for those who launch a charge against their spouses and have in support no evidence but their own, their solitary evidence can be received if they bear witness 4 times by Allah that they are solemnly telling the truth. So this is a case of a suspicion of infidelity. So let's say it's the husband, he swears 4 times, and then what happens? The punishment is not of 100 lashes is not carried out. Look at what happens in verse 7. And the 5th oath, that they solemnly invoke the curse of Allah on themselves, they tell a lie. And then verse 8, but it would avert the punishment from the wife if she bears witness 4 times by Allah that the husband is telling a lie. And the 5th oath should be that she solemnly invokes the wrath on herself if her accuser is telling the truth. Now, I'm not going to discuss the law of adultery. What principle we're learning from here is that in order for the punishment of jalada to be carried out, there has to be incontrovertible evidence that this is the case. And if the husband is a solitary witness, in other words, he's the only person bearing evidence, and the wife simply has to bear evidence to the contrary, and no beating is sort of carried out. Now, if that's the case, then daraba in the context of 434, which is a mere suspicion of the wife's infidelity, can simply not mean beating, because that would violate the verse on 24:2, where the wife simply, or 24:6, where the wife simply bears her own sort of evidence that she is not guilty. And the words used are completely different. The word in 434 is daraba, and the word in 24:6 is jalada. So, when to beat? A person may only be beaten if there is a proven case of adultery. Such beating is to be administered by the authorities and not the other spouse. So the other spouse doesn't take this person out to the public and start flogging it. It has to flogging him or her. It has to be done in a systematic way. I think that's quite logical, because the verse is all in the plural and telling us how to carry out the punishment. In 434, the husband merely has a suspicion or a doubt as to the wife's fidelity, of which I would say he should be reasonably certain of. If he could beat his wife for this reason, it would contradict 24:6-9, where she is required to take the oath which will absolve her of any blame or guilt and avert the punishment of hitting. So what does the word daraba mean? We had lots of discussions. In fact, when I was at the conference in Cape Town, the Interfaith conference, we met a lady who did research into this word daraba, and she interviewed apparently lots of Islamic professors, and she did her PhD in this. And Qasim was present, and I think so was Yunus, if my memory serves me correctly. And we had this discussion on daraba with her, and we could iron out the issue in less than 5 minutes. But she interviewed almost all the PhDs she could find in Islamic studies, and they all concurred that the word daraba does mean beat. So I simply turned her to Lane's lexicon, and something that's from Joseph Islam, which we looked up and found very, very interesting. Okay, so what does the word daraba mean? The word daraba as a verb occurs about 60 times in the Quran, and if you look at your note, I've listed it all for you. When it occurs as a verb, as a noun, and all its various forms. In 434, the word daraba occurs in its imperative form. And the imperative doesn't necessarily mean a physical beating. The imperative simply means an instruction. So we mustn't get carried away by the fact that it's in the imperative sense, right? It's used about 60 times in the Quran to mean put forth, to beat, strike, pace in the land, or to make physical contact. We'll come to the note on the side a little later. Right. The word daraba continued. With such a wide variety of meanings, how does one select an appropriate meaning? Whenever the imperative verb idrib, right? So it's our Arabic colleagues will tell us it's from a simple triliteral daraba, and it's idrib in the imperative sense. Whenever the imperative verb idrib is used in the Quran to denote strike, whether idiomatically or otherwise, the Quran always qualifies it by making clear by either one or both of the following: what object to use to strike with, or what part of the body or object to strike. So Allah doesn't leave it to us to decide. He tells us exactly, and He makes it very clear in the use of the word that it is a physical strike. So for example, in Surah 2 verse 60, strike the rock. So Allah is telling us what He told Musa alayhi salam to do, to strike the rock with what? With your staff. Right? So there's no miswak in this context or a light toothbrush or something, it's all absent. Strike with a part of it, strike the rock with your staff. Sorry, someone's, I can hear background noise coming in. Can you please mute your phone? Strike off their heads and strike off every fingertip of them. Strike off every fingertip of them. So you see that wherever the word darab, and this is every single occurrence in the imperative sense, where it's telling you exactly how to strike and what to strike. Strike for them a dry path in the sea. Then Abraham turned upon them, striking with the right hand. And 38:44, take in your hand a bundle of rushes and strike with it. Now this is in the context of Ayyub alayhi salam. We can deal with it a little later, but again here there's some odd interpretations that Ayyub alayhi salam was told to take a bunch of sticks together and beat his wife. There's nothing like that from the Quranic context. It has a very different meaning and application in the Quran. There's just no justification for the interpretation. So all of these verses, what's very clear is that, in fact, 38:44 it's quite clearly saying to Ayyub alayhi salam, to me, take a bundle of rushes and rub with it. So he had to take some herbs from the earth and rub with it because he had an ailment. So Allah is telling you what contact to make when He wants you to understand that the word daraba is used in the sense of making contact. So darb, what meaning can we take? Darb clearly implies a distance. So Allah says, وَإِذَا دَرَبَتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, when you are distancing in the land, when you are traveling in the land. So the more appropriate word in English would be traveling, but the word, the Arabic would be distancing. So in other words, you're making a distance. It can also imply discipline or bringing one's attention to something. The word daraba could be used for that as well. As physical beating is reserved for proven cases of adultery, and looking at the next verse in 435, so if you read 435, it says, if you fear a breach between them, then appoint arbiters, one from his family and one from hers, if they wish for reconciliation. So as physical beating is reserved for proven cases of adultery, and looking at the next verse, 435, the meaning of separation, shunning or distancing would better suit the verse to flow into the next. Why? Because in the next verse what we're talking about is reconciliation. So in the meaning that we derive from all of the verses put together and apply to 435, so the word daraba in this context is separating or shunning. So in other words, وَلَاتِ تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ, as to those women on whose part you fear disloyalty or ill conduct, فَعِذُوهُنَّ, admonish them, وَاهْجُرُوهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ, separate from the beds, and وَاضْرِبُوهُنَّ, shun them, distance yourselves from them completely. And that would mean that you go into the next phase either for reconciliation or for divorce proceedings. But one can hardly imagine having a reconciliation after having beaten your wife. But so for more than one reason, the interpretation of beating doesn't make sense when applied to this verse. Right. So the verse retranslated, and I'll just go back into the Arabic a bit. As to those women on whose part you fear disloyalty, advise them and appeal to them and appeal to their conscience. Move them away from the marital bed, or cease intimacy, or separate from them. So in other words, you separate and you maintain a full physical distance. So the one would be advising them, the other one would be separating the marital bed, but obviously you still have breakfast, lunch and supper together, and the third one is a complete separation, and hopefully from there either from there could either be a reconciliation or the parties then can then go their own ways. And if they decide for reconciliation, then Surah 4 verse 35 applies. Alright, so before I conclude, some of the Arabic scholars have gone into the word daraba, and the conservative scholars have gone into the word daraba and looked at it from their perspective and said, by the word daraba, when it's followed by the word an, and this is the only other argument, when it's followed by the word an, means to turn away. For example, in Surah 43, I think it's 43:5. It says, أَفَنَضْرِبْ عَنْكُمُ الذِّكْرَ. It's in my note there. أَفَنَضْرِبْ عَنْكُمُ الذِّكْرَ. Surah 43 verse 5. Those of you who are using the Yusuf Ali, page 1324. Shall we then take away, the word Daraba is used, أَفَنَضْرِبْ عَنْكُمُ الذِّكْرَ. Shall we then take away the message from you and repel you, for that you are people transgressing beyond bounds. Now what the use of the word Daraba in this context means is quite clearly, it's not talking about beating, but it's talking about separating or taking away. So you can see the word separating, taking away or distancing, being applied to the word Daraba. And what they say is that when the word an follows the word Daraba, then only then does it mean separating. If you look at Lane's lexicon, which is on the right hand side of the screen, if you look at Daraba anhu in red, and this is from Joseph Islam, and I must compliment him, he's done brilliant work on this. It means he turned away a person or thing from him, is also idrib anhu. If you look at the third line, idrib anhu signifies also, and so does Daraba anhu. He turned away from, avoided, shunned, or left him or it. So when I look at the word Daraba as well in Lane's lexicon, you get a range of meanings, and it's all about discipline, distancing, etc. But as you can see here, Daraba anhu also means to distance yourself from another party. So one can find justification in the Arabic for that as well. But our primary justification is from the overall text and context of the Quran. So we put all the verses together and we say, what meaning do we come to when we apply? What meaning do we come to when we look at the Quran as a whole for the word Daraba? How does Allah use it? What does the word strike imply? Where else is it used? And as we found, it's only used in 24, 4 and 6, where you're flogging the person 80 or 100 times, and it's never used anywhere else. So, and the other thing to think about as well, nowhere in the Quran does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourage or require the beating of one individual upon another. Not even does Allah set it out as a disciplinary measure to beat your children. Now, I mean, if you talk to traditional scholars, they'll talk about you got to beat your child if they don't pray salah after the age of 12 and all of that. The Quran doesn't set any of that out. There is no justification for one beating another. Parents may apply their own disciplinary measures, but if they have a tendency to one particular disciplinary measure, let's not read that into the Quran for the sake of convenience. What we find in the Quran is that there is simply no verse indicating one beating another for a disciplinary measure. So, in conclusion, when bearing in mind the mawaddah and the rahmah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed between husband and wife, the beating of women contradicts this spirit too. Right? Nowhere in the Quran does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislate beating another person except in the case of adultery, which, as I said earlier, is done in the course of law and not taking the law into your own hands. Not even beating one's child for disobedience is prescribed. I'm not saying it's haram to do so. I'm saying it's not in the Quran. It's not prescribed in the Quran as a punishment for anything. When reading the Quran as a whole, it makes for interpreting the word darb in 434 as beating impossible and untenable, as the word darb is not qualified by either intensity, quantification, or specifically where to beat, nor is the verse giving us progressive and more intense stages of punishment. So that's the presentation. Jazakallah. We can take questions and comments now. So I'm going to hand over to Nazir.
So fast.
Right, so I think we can just tell.
Learn to raise hands.
Yeah.
So do you know how to raise it?
Yeah, let me just see.
At the bottom of the screen, there's a place to raise your hands.
So there's a place to raise your hands for questions, which is a very nice tool for us. We all don't talk at the same time. So we can tell you how to find it. If you go to your main screen,
Ask them whether they can see.
okay. So can you see Nazir and me on the screen?